Chapter 33. Grandfather considers himself a person who loves flowers and cherishes them. He is also quite knowledgeable in the field of planting. Today, I have really learned something new. Grandfather pays attention to rewards, granddaughter pays attention to nurturing. Their starting points are different, so there is nothing to compare. How is there no difference? It is because you are more attentive than others. The same thing, you raise it better than others. Grandfather has seen it when you were young. At that time, Luo Peishan only felt that it was not bad. In the end, he made a mistake. Jingwan smiled but did not say anything. She did not argue with Luo Peishan. Third lass, you said just now that you brought a few pots of flowers from Qian Prefecture. What are they? Luo Peishan asked. At first, he did not care, but who knew if there would be a surprise now? There are mainly camellias. There are 3. There is also a peony, a pot of chrysanthemum, and a pot of orchids. What are the varieties? Thinking about it, they should not be bad since they took the trouble to bring them to the capital from afar. The camellias are crane plume, strong fragrance, 18 scholars. Luo Peishan, who was drinking tea, was shocked. Although he did not spit out the tea in his mouth, he still choked and coughed violently. Jingwan quickly went around the table and patted Luo Peishan's back. Grandfather, why are you so careless? How did you choke? The others also became anxious and gathered around. However, it was obvious that they knew why their father was choking. If it were them, they would probably be even more unbearable. Just listen to what this girl was saying. Famous goods, precious goods, rare and famous species. Luo Peishan waved his hand and drove them to the side. He looked at Jingwan's eyes, which made Jingwan's heart somewhat uncomfortable. Grandfather, what else is there? You can say it all at once. I can still bear it. He touched his old heart. Jingwan lived in Qian Prefecture all year round. Over there, growing flowers and plants was not very popular. In the capital, it did not seem to be very popular either. At least, there were no families who wanted to raise famous plants, and there was no such thing as flower competition. However, who didn't raise some flowers and plants? There were definitely many people who truly loved flowers, and in this circle, a pot of truly precious plants was definitely hard to find even with thousands of gold. Therefore, Jingwan did not know that if people knew that she had those things in her hands, the Luo family's doorstep would definitely be trampled flat. A group of normally serious old things would give up their old face to beg her. She also did not know what kind of wealth she had in her hands. However, from Luo Peishan's reaction, Jingwan more or less understood that she seemed to have underestimated her treasures. The peony is red, white, and pink. The chrysanthemum is jade phoenix. The orchid is a pot of special clivia. Jingwan saw her grandfather go from being shocked to being calm to being numb. Towards the end, his voice became softer and softer as if he had done something wrong. Luo Peishan felt that he needed to be quiet for a while. Luo Peishan really was quiet for a long time. Then, he looked at Jingwan with shining eyes. Originally, he was envious of those stubborn old fellows. Now, he was not the least bit envious. Under the circumstances that he did not know, his home had become a treasure mountain. There was no need to think of a way to get it from them. His own family had better things. Who would spend such a huge price to get their defective products? He wanted to see how those old fellows would show off. Just casually taking out a pot from his dear granddaughter would make them die of envy. As for suspecting that Jingwan was lying, exaggerating, or making a mistake because she did not recognize them, when he thought about Jingwan's nature and understanding of flowers and plants, it was simply impossible. Wan, come. Tell grandfather, where did you get these good treasures? It should be known that those old fellows with deep backgrounds would spend countless efforts to get a famous plant. Most of the time, it could only be found by chance. Why was it that when it came to his granddaughter, although it was not like cabbage, why did it feel so easy? It did not make sense. Jingwan could not help but take 2 steps back. Sure enough, when it came to the good stuff, even a serious and decent person would have to change his expression. Grandfather, it was my luck that was better. Some of them were found outside. Because the people in the flower market did not recognize them and did not see them bloom, I was sometimes not sure. In the end, I brought them back to raise them well and picked up a big bargain. Grandmother also indulged me and instructed the people in the plantation. They all knew that I liked those flowers and plants, so they sent some to me when they saw some in the wild. Not to mention that I really picked up 2 treasures, there were also a lot of inferior ones. That Clivier was a rural farmer who, because he was really short of money, made a lot of messy flowers and plants, hoping that I would take a fancy to one of them. I pitied him and wanted to give him some money regardless of whether he had it or not. I did not expect to see a mutant Clivier. When Jingwan talked about her great achievements, she was also very proud. This was also possible. Then did it mean that these people who thought highly of themselves actually missed out on a lot of treasures because of their poor eyesight? It was simply heartbreaking. If it were not for the fact that it was already too late now, Luo Peishan even wanted to drag Jingwan to the flower market right now and pick up all those hidden treasures. He would not let this matter rest. At this time, Luo Rongwei also opened his mouth with a bit of grief. Third girl, 3 years ago, your grandmother handed over our family's greenhouse to you to take care of. Although fourth uncle does not go there every day, he still goes there to take a look every now and then. Those treasures you mentioned, I did not see a single pot. Did you hide them? Jingwan did not feel guilty about hiding anything. Fourth uncle, you moved away a pot of my flowers in 10 days to half a month. Although there were many that were not the best, they were still first class. You did not know the value of the goods and either gave them away casually or ruined them. How could I dare let you see those real treasures? If you really saw them and asked for them, how could I not give them to you? But if I gave them to you, my heart would ache to death. Just those that you took away, my heart ached for a long time. Luo Rongwei was embarrassed. He was wondering why there was a period of time when his mother forbade him to go to third girl's place to take flowers for fun. Luo Peishan suddenly picked up a book from the table and threw it at Luo Rongwei. You wastrel. Hearing Jingwan say this, his heart ached to death even though he did not see it. This old man is telling you, if you dare to take one step closer to WN Wan's greenhouse in the future, this old man will break your legs. The scholarly and refined old man, even if he was reprimanding people, his words were very elegant and he would not act excessively. Suddenly, his words shocked all the children and grandchildren. Looking at Luo Peishan, their eyes were about to fall out of their sockets. The better ones were also a bit dazed. They even doubted if this was really their father. Luo Peishan coughed to cover it up. When he was young, what had he not done? Was there a need to be so shocked? The flowers and plants that third girl raised when she was young were all very ordinary species. I just felt that you raised them better than others. Other than feeling that you were clever in this aspect, I did not have any other thoughts. If I had known earlier, I would have taken you out for a walk earlier. At the very least, I would have given you some of my better species to raise. Perhaps, unfortunately, no one in this world knew earlier. Jingwan laughed in spite of herself. Grandfather, I was young then and did not understand many things. Not to mention that you would not want to raise them for me, I also did not dare to do it myself. It's grandfather's fault. Luo Peishan seemed to have thought of something. You only brought a few pots. What about the rest? Some were given away, and some are placed in Qi and Manor to take care of the servants in the greenhouse. I have taught them many things, so it's enough for them to take care of those flowers. I can make a list. Grandfather, if you like them, you can have them send them to the capital. Luo Peishan naturally did not disagree. Then, he thought of what Jingwan had said before and asked anxiously, how are the pots of treasures that were brought to the capital now? They are basically all back. The 18 scholar is in the best condition and is about to bloom. As for the other 2 pots of camellia, I have plucked the buds. I plan to let them take care of themselves this year and not bloom. The Clivier has also been treated, but the peoness flowering period is still 1 or 2 months away. It is enough time to completely raise them back. Luo Peishan was very excited when he heard this. If it were not for his rationality, it would not be good to barge into his granddaughter's courtyard directly. Now, he wanted to go and take a look. What is with the 3 colors? How can there be 3 different kinds of flowers on a tree? Wasn't that more precious than the 4 famous flowers? I've never even heard of it before. Am I too ignorant and inexperienced? Chapter 34. Luo Peishan sighed at Jingwan's intelligence, but he thought more in his heart. He joked that maybe Jingwan was a flower fairy in her previous life, which was why she was so clever in cultivating flowers and plants. Grandfather, how about I ask someone to move them here for you to take a look? Jingwan saw his eagerness and said. Luo Peishan hesitated, they just came back. If they are moved, what if they get hurt? How can they be so delicate? They are fine from Qi and prefecture to the capital. How about just the 18 scholars? And Molan? Luo Peishan was really itching, so he nodded and agreed. So he ordered the servant to go back with Jingwan's maid. Of course, he couldn't leave the rest of the flowers behind. In the process of waiting, Luo Peishan was quite restless. He wasn't even this anxious when facing the important matters of the imperial court. Luo Jingde and his 2 brothers were waiting outside the door. Coming. Luo Peishan stood up and walked quickly to the door. After a while, he asked someone to bring the flowers in as if he was protecting something. Molan had already seen them. Even if they were in their most beautiful state, they were not as attractive as the 18 scholars. The 18 scholars of 1 pearl wasn't very big, but it wasn't small either. It was as tall as a person, and because it had been taken care of well, it looked very lush and verdant. There were buds of various sizes, and some of them had petals that could be seen. It's 18 scholars of 1 pearl. Luo Peishan was very careful. He wanted to touch them but didn't dare to. They looked delicate and fragile, as if they would break if he touched them. Seeing him like this, the others naturally didn't dare to touch them. They were sure that if they touched them, they would definitely be beaten. As the only girl here, Jingwan reached out to touch them. Grandfather, you don't have to be so careful. But her words didn't work. She had seen a lot and raised a lot, but she didn't understand the mentality of people like her grandfather. Jingwan felt helpless. Most people couldn't raise these precious breeds well. Other than the problem of technique, it was also because they cared too much about them. Because they were overly careful, it would backfire. Just like humans, the more carefully they were raised, the more carefully they were raised. If they didn't appear weak, then they would be raised into a crooked seedling. There weren't many that could thrive. When she was in Qi and prefecture, she had also told the gardeners about it. However, they still could not let loose. Because it was expensive, they could not afford to pay for it even if they sacrificed their lives. Therefore, they had to be careful. It was simply a vicious cycle. After that, he put everything aside and wandered around the 2 pots of flowers. As for those who didn't particularly like them, when their father wasn't paying attention, they flipped through the flora of fragrances. They could more or less learn a few tricks, and they could even remember some of the plants that they had never seen before. Even if they didn't plant them themselves, it was still good to show them off. Old Madame Luo waited and waited, but Old Master Luo didn't come, nor did her children and grandchildren come to pay their respects. Seeing that dinner time was almost over, she sent someone to the front study to take a look. Only then did she know the reason. Old Madame Luo didn't say much, and only ordered the food to be sent to the front yard. At this time, WN was still a treasure in the Luo family. Old Master probably doted on her more than himself. Why don't you leave these flowers with grandfather? Seeing that Luo Peishan hadn't gone to eat for a long time, Jingwan opened her mouth and said, "Move them back. WN, grandfather will be at ease if you take care of them." Luo Peishan said without turning his head. "That's fine. Come, send the flowers back to the elegant begonia house." "Why move them now? There's no hurry. Move them later." Jingwan looked at Luo Peishan with a smile. "No, grandfather. If you don't move them now, granddaughter won't be responsible for taking care of them." "You little girl, are you threatening your grandfather?" Luo Peishan seemed to be angry. Luo Rongyan and Luo Jingguo's palms were sweating. How could this girl be so arrogant because she was pampered so easily? They naturally knew what kind of person Luo Peishan was. Looking amiable, could she stroke a tiger's whiskers? Jingwan's smile didn't change. "Yes. Grandfather, you don't need to eat dinner and don't do anything. You must get rid of this root of trouble. How could Luo Peishan not know Jingwan's intentions? She was worried about his health. He wasn't really angry, and Wan was also wasting time with him. She was hungry, so he felt quite guilty. As for whether his children and grandchildren were also hungry, a group of big men, so what if they were hungry? Luo Peishan couldn't help laughing. Okay, move them away, move them away. But if I want to see them in the future, quickly send them over. Grandfather, don't worry. I promise to be on call. After Jingwan and the others left, Luo Peishan instructed that in the future, the residence's greenhouse would be handed over to Third Miss to manage. She could do whatever she wanted. Only a few people knew that in Luo Peishan's eyes, the greenhouse was as important as the study. Luo Peishan was really in a good mood today. Seeing that his good-for-nothing children and grandchildren were also very pleasing to the eye, he didn't reprimand them. Instead, he said a few words amiably and let them leave. When they were far away, Luo Jingming suddenly said, "In the future, when grandfather is angry, why don't you ask third sister to come and put out the fire?" Luo Rongping coughed heavily. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Luo Jingming shrunk his neck in the face of his own father. Luo Rongyan reached out and pinched Luo Jingming's neck. Some words are better left unsaid. It's meaningless to say them out loud. The meaning was self-evident. This showed that even the indifferent and otherworldly Luo Rongyan was actually afraid of his father. The last time Jingwan went to the study, because she didn't cause any commotion, the others just looked on coldly from the sidelines. This time, it was completely different. All the male masters of the Luo family who could speak were there. They were very clear about Luo Peishan's attitude. Now that the two people with the highest status in the Luo family were holding her in the palm of their hands, in addition to Jingwan's own value, who would dare to slight her? Even if they didn't curry favor with her, at least they wouldn't openly find fault with her. It must be known that once one's heart was biased, then even if she was wrong, it would be someone else's fault first. In the main courtyard of Prince Jin's residence, the bedroom was brightly lit. Compared to the wealth and extravagance of other places in the prince's residence, this place was filled with warmth and comfort. If Jingwan was here, she would definitely see some traces of familiarity, because the layout was somewhat similar to her boudoir. One could imagine how crazy Li Hongyuan was when he peeked at Jingwan. At this moment, Li Hongyuan was sitting quietly on the couch. On the small jade table on the couch was a pot of blooming Chinese roses. Because it wasn't the peak of the flowering period, there weren't many flowers in full bloom. However, every single one of them was still tender and beautiful, without the slightest bit of damage. The branches and leaves were also carefully cared for, without the slightest trace of wilting. If Jingwan saw this pot of flowers, she would definitely be shocked. It was something she had given away before leaving Qi and Fu. Li Hongyuan gently fiddled with the petals with his fingers and was lost in thought for a long time. It was unknown whether he was really looking at the flowers or looking at the face of the person who raised them through the flowers. Only a few people, including Eunuch Mu, knew that all the flowers and trees that Jingwan gave away or sold in Qi and Prefecture, whether they were expensive or ordinary, eventually fell into the hands of Li Hongyuan. A few pots were presented to several big shots in the capital city who loved flowers by their subordinates. If it were not for the fact that they couldn't get them through other channels and Li Hongyuan himself didn't want to be on bad terms with them, he would be afraid of arousing suspicion if he asked for them by force. Therefore, he might be able to find some clues if he got to the bottom of it. Otherwise, he would have come to rob them in person. Wan's painstakingly made collection of flowers and the Molan painting that she drew day and night were all in the hands of that old fox, Luo Peishan. Relying on the fact that he was Wan's direct elder, he took advantage of him. However, those things would be his sooner or later. Luo Peishan had better keep them safe for him. If there was even the slightest bit of damage, he might suffer a little in the future. When the fine brushwork painting was first introduced in his previous life, Li Hongyuan really thought that it was created by Luo Jingbua. But in this life, when Jingwan first started painting, he already knew who it was. Another group of people who took advantage of Wan. Similarly, he couldn't chop them up at will. When the fine brushwork painting was first introduced, It was highly sought after by the world because it was so vivid. Although there were originally similar painting methods, because it wasn't systematic, the effect was far from that of fine brushwork. Therefore, it quickly became popular. For a period of time, it was even more unrestrained than freehand painting. After 1 or 2 years, it gradually reached a balance. Chapter 35. In his previous life, Jingwan didn't raise as many famous plants as she did in this life. After all, other than Jingwan's discerning eyes, some of the famous plants were sent to her by him. Jingwan was lucky, so he would let her be even luckier. There were also those books about flowers and trees, fragrances, and even books on agriculture. As long as there was a little bit of relevance, she collected everything from the past to the present. As for the paints used for painting, if she wanted them, she would send people to search all over the country. Whether it was something that had already been used or something that was heard could be used to paint, if the Luo family's servants wanted to find it, they would always be able to find the relevant information and obtain unexpected gains. It wasn't that Madame Luo didn't have any suspicions, but the result of the investigation was that her granddaughter was very lucky. In her previous life, she captured the hearts of a group of people with the few rare treasures and many high-quality plants. However, because of her age, in order to avoid suspicion, only those old fellows with Luo Peishan's permission could directly curry favor with her. Jingwan's heart was pure and kind, and she respected the elderly. Those old fellows generally didn't need to pay too much to get what they wanted. They could get the famous plants they wanted from her, and even some cultivation methods that outsiders didn't know about. Those benefits were basically obtained by Luo Peishan on her behalf. And those people were self-conscious, so naturally, they wouldn't take Jingwan's things for free. At that time, Li Hongyuan wasn't a person who liked flowers and plants, but he heard that several officials in the capital almost fought over a pot of multicolored peonies. It could be seen that Jingwan was really their treasure. Thus, even if Jingwan didn't have a father in a high position, she still had a lot of advantages in her hands. When she was in trouble, as long as they were willing to help, they could easily help her. However, Jingwan's trouble was too big. Under the imperial power, they wanted to help, but they were powerless. After all, no matter how precious the famous plants were, they couldn't compare to the lives of their own families. They could only secretly regret. Because she knew their difficulties, she didn't expect anyone to help her from the beginning. Therefore, Jingwan did not hold any grudges against them for standing idly by. Instead, she took the initiative to distance herself from them. Li Hongyuan closed his eyes and rubbed the space between his eyebrows. There were some things that he really couldn't think about. Every time he thought about it, he might lose control of his emotions and want to uproot all the problems right now. However, it was still far from the right time. If things got messy at this time, he wouldn't be able to control the overall situation, and it would shake the foundation of Qi Yuan. This was not something he wanted to see. He didn't want to be like his previous life, where he would have to spend a lot of time to manage the unstable country. How would he have the time to share the joy with Wan? The gains would not make up for the losses. As for giving up the country, don't joke around. He was hated by so many people. No matter who ascended the throne, they would definitely want to kill him. Wan naturally would not be spared. As for giving up on Wan, that was the only obsession he had in his 2 lifetimes. That was even more impossible. To him, the position of emperor was not that important. After all, he had already sat on the throne. Although the supreme power made people yearn for it, it was still inferior to Wan. Someone come. A beautiful servant girl quietly walked in. Master. Send it back. Yes. The servant girl stepped forward and carefully picked up the flower pot. Originally, it didn't have much weight to her, but she had to pay 120% attention to it because this flower was more precious than her life. Li Hongyuan didn't raise these flowers and plants in the Jin Wangfu because each pot was taken care of by a person. If he left them in the Jin Wangfu, it would be too eye-catching. Although he seemed to have no power or influence, he was favored by the emperor. There would always be people who wanted to curry favor with him. Naturally, they would look for the source of the things he especially liked, which was not what he wanted. All of them were raised in a manor outside the city. With such a large manor, who would care about the people who took care of the flowers and plants in the manor? Who would know that some people's real responsibility was only to take care of the pots of flowers and plants? In the manor, there were many famous and precious things, but the most popular job among the gardeners was to raise a pot of flowers and plants. No one knew the origin of these flowers and plants. Perhaps they were not very expensive, but if the master liked them, their value would increase exponentially. Although if they were raised badly, they would inevitably lose their lives. But if they were raised well, the reward was enough to make countless people jealous. Therefore, when new flowers and plants were specially ordered to be taken care of by the higher-ups, except for those who already had exclusive flowers and plants, everyone would rush forward to make sure that it was something they could raise and do everything possible to get it. After a good night's sleep, Jingwan got up early and began to recover her morning exercise that had been interrupted for a long time. Good health was very important, especially in this place where a small cold could kill people. She had been healthy since she was young, and it was not without reason. Her goal was to be like some people in her previous life, who were over 50 years old but still had a body that was completely comparable to that of a woman in her 20s. Anyway, she had a lot of time now. As long as she was willing to persevere, it was not just a thought at all. Jingwan sometimes acted strangely, but the people around her were used to it. After all, Jingwan did not act out of line at the beginning, but she did it step by step, bit by bit. When it became a routine, everyone felt that it was natural. However, Mama Gong, who was good at maintaining health, was a bit strange at first, but after seeing it a few times, she understood the benefits. Not only did she not stop Jingwan, but she also made some appropriate changes to achieve the best results. After sweating, she washed up and drank a bowl of bloodbird's nest porridge. Only then did she go to Falling Plum House to pay her respects to her parents, and then to the main courtyard to pay her respects to her grandmother. As for her grandfather, he had left early. If there was morning court, he would go to court. If there was no morning court, he would go to the yamen. If there was an important matter, he would go to the inner court. However, this time, Jingwan unexpectedly saw Luo Peishan. After paying her respects, she asked, "Grandfather, is it a day off today?" Third girl, after breakfast, tidy up. Make it simple and go out with grandfather. When he said this, there was a hint of urgency. Jingwan did not ask any more questions and only respectfully agreed. Madame Luo knew what he wanted to do, and a few people more or less guessed it. Come back early in the morning. Minute Jia has been waiting for your day off. He wants to ask you for advice. Don't wait until after dinner again. Obviously, even though they had not been together for a few years, Madame Luo still knew Luo Peishan very well. When she spoke, she glanced at Jingwan, but Jingwan did not respond. Luo Peishan agreed. Minute Jia was his wife's grandnephew, and would most likely become his third girl's husband. Naturally, he had to guide him. Among the grandchildren, other than the 3 oldest brothers, only Jingwan had the honor to go out with Luo Peishan. They were basically numb to the special treatment that Jingwan received. At most, they would say a few words of jealousy in their hearts. Only she knew how to curry favor and act obedient. However, even if she did, it was still her ability. Others could not do it even if they wanted to. Luo Peishan changed into casual clothes. He was an ordinary old man. At most, he had a scholarly temperament. When people saw him, they knew that his identity was probably not ordinary. Jingwan was also dressed plainly. She did not wear any headdress, and she did not wear anything on her wrist. The grandfather and grandson pair each took 2 people and separately got into the carriage. Then, they strolled out. Jingwan knew that this trip was to the flower market. Grandfather brought her to Daobao. It was really making the best use of people. Jingwan also liked it very much. Because there were elders accompanying her, Jingwan was not restrained. Following beside Luo Shangshu, she looked around and enjoyed it. The capital's flower market was much bigger than Qian Prefecture. There were many varieties of flowers and trees, and the quality was better. However, because there were many knowledgeable people, it was more difficult to find a good one. After listening to her grandfather's introduction, She knew that this street was basically filled with flowers that were planted by flower farmers outside the city to support their families. Or wild flowers that were dug from the wild. Most of them were very ordinary. It was difficult to find a good variety. Of course, occasionally, there would be peddlers from other places. They would bring them along because they did not know them. Therefore, they might be extraordinary or worthless. If he did not bring Jingwan, Luo Peishan probably would not have come here. Although Daobao was one thing, looking at different flowers and trees was also a kind of enjoyment. Chapter 36. When it came to flower arrangement, Jingwan was even more knowledgeable. "Grandfather, I'll show you." In front of one of the stalls, Jing Wn used the flower branches that had been cut off and a small basket that looked a little tattered. She filled it with dead branches and leaves. As for the flower branches, she just casually trimmed and cut them before inserting them into the basket one by one. She also did some decorations on the edges. In a short period of time, the things that people didn't pay attention to had completely changed. It looked a little messy, but it was very pleasing to the eye. It was even elegant. Even the most picky person would at most look down on the things that were used but would not look down on the whole thing. Luo Peishan loved flowers, but he also did not want them unless they were famous. Only today did he know that he was short-sighted. Just like that person, those with extraordinary status were always in the minority. Most of them were commoners. Could it be that they could deny their emotions? Could it be that they did not have beauty and value? They did, and they were very high. It seems that grandfather still needs to learn from WNWAN. Not flower arrangement, but values. Although Luo Peishan did not know this word. In a trance, he seemed to recall the past when he was an official. He thought that he should be a good official, but perhaps it was far from enough. Jingwan did not know that in a flash, her grandfather thought so much. She took the handkerchief from the servant girl and wiped her hands. From the moment Jingwan started to do it, there were many onlookers. At first, they were puzzled, but later, they were full of admiration. They looked at her with curiosity. Although she looked like an ordinary person, her words and actions did not seem like they came from an ordinary family. Therefore, they did not dare to be rude. However, the stall owner did not stop Jingwan because she touched his things without permission. He got a bunch of flowers for free. Even if he could not sell it, it was still pleasing to the eye. Just as she walked out of the crowd, she saw an old man with a smile on his face. However, this old man's skin was very white, whiter than most women. Moreover, his beard looked relatively sparse. Even his Adam's apple was not obvious. Jingwan thought that when this person was young, he was most likely mistaken for a woman. However, her grandfather, who was originally smiling, immediately pulled a long face when he saw this person. It was obvious that the two of them knew each other. Perhaps they were enemies. The white-faced old man cupped his hands together. "Greetings, Lord Luo." Luo Peishan looked at him disapprovingly, as if he really wanted to ignore him. The old man's smile remained unchanged as he looked at Jingwan. "This is Lord Luo's granddaughter. The flowers are arranged so well." Luo Peishan snorted. "My second son's legitimate daughter, third in rank. This is Lord Diwu of the Supreme Court." "Greetings, Lord Diwu." Jingwan curtsied in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. She was well-mannered. "Good, good. Little girls are the best. Unlike us old men, who are hated by others." The fifth Tai Ching stroked his beard. Jingwan was speechless. No wonder they didn't want to deal with him. Look at how much hatred he had. "Little girl, Lord Diwu's house has the most complete camellias. However, grandfather seems to be missing the 18 scholars and the strong fragrance. Also, the flower crane plume doesn't look good. Alas, what a pity." Every time Luo Peishan spoke, a strand of the fifth Taiching's beard would break. Then, a few strands were broken in succession. It was already a small number to begin with. Jingwan felt sorry for him when she saw it. He said you were hated by others, but you turned around and poked his soft spot. They were old friends. They knew each other's moral character very well. In the court, they were the kind of people who did business according to the rules. In private, especially when it came to flowers, they would blow their beard and glare at each other. Luo Peishan usually restrained himself, but in front of several people who knew his preferences, his image and face had already been torn to the side. How could some words just be said? Why, Lord Luo, do you know where to find the 18 scholars, strong fragrance, and better flower crane plume? The fifth Tai Ching was still able to hold his ground. I do know where to find it. The 18 scholars have seen it. It's about to bloom. It looks much better than the defective goods that some people keep in their homes. The fifth Tai Ching's beard was broken again. Old man Luo, don't play dumb with this old man. What do you want? Hurry up and say it. Luo Peishan didn't want to pay attention to him. With Jingwan around, what famous goods couldn't he get? In the future, it would only be others who would beg him. Just wait and see. If he didn't make up for all the anger he had suffered in the past, he wouldn't be Luo Peishan. He didn't know whether old man Luo was telling the truth or deliberately teasing him. However, as long as there was a slight possibility, the fifth Tai Ching didn't want to give up. He had been yearning for it for too long. Therefore, like a small attendant, he wandered around Luo Peishan. And Luo Peishan acted like an old master. That scene made people want to cover their faces and couldn't bear to look directly at it. Didn't you see that Lord Diwu's attendant looked like he couldn't wait to find a hole to hide in? It was too embarrassing in public. Master, you should at least wait for a place where there is no one around. Jingwan was laughing at the side. It turned out that as long as they had the same interests, these powerful and decisive old men could be so cute. Jingwan suddenly saw something more unexpected. She walked forward, reached out, and carefully picked up a small thing that looked like a lotus flower. It was half the size of a palm and had thick cotyledons. She put it on her handkerchief and looked at it carefully. Yes, it was indeed a guanine lotus. She remembered that the origin of this succulent plant was not in Huaxia. She had always thought that the Qi Yuan dynasty and Huaxia just had a different timeline and should still be in the same land. After all, they had a lot of similar history. But how did this little thing appear? It seemed that no one had the ability to cross the two continents. Moreover, there was a small pile of other varieties of succulents next to it. They were small and delicate and looked very cute. It didn't seem like someone would travel thousands of miles to get these. Luo Peishan followed up. Girl, what's so special about this little thing? Nothing, granddaughter just suddenly had some ideas. Grandpa, granddaughter will make another small bonsai for you to see. What do you think? The bonsai here had reached a certain scale, but they were still relatively conservative. Generally, they were single plants, neither very big nor very small, and the style was relatively simple. Jingwan believed that as long as they were given some ideas, they would be able to create a variety of bonsai. Jingwan never doubted their creativity and imagination. Luo Peishan's interest was piqued, and so was the fifth Tai Ching. Perhaps it was because the fifth Tai Ching often came here, but the stall owner recognized him and naturally did not dare to neglect him. What do you need, miss? Jingwan described her requirements one by one. She replaced the things that she could not find at the moment, so she quickly found what she wanted. It was a relatively short but relatively large flower pot. Seeing that Jingwan was about to get the sand and soil by herself, Nanny Gong, who had been quietly following her, suddenly came forward to stop her. Miss, please tell me what you want. I will do it, so that you don't hurt your hands. Jingwan looked at her hands. Well, it was not dirty before. A well-bred girl like her had to be pampered everywhere. How could the stall owner be so blind? How can I let Miss do it? Miss, please tell me what to do. I will do it. Jingwan opened her mouth, and the stall owner asked another shop assistant to do it. As long as they were good at it, it was actually very simple. But because it was the first time, they were a little clumsy. Jingwan was quite helpless, but she knew that not only Nanny Gong, even her grandfather would not allow her to do it. When it was time to plant the small succulents, Jingwan was unwilling to continue. Her mouth was dry from talking, but she might not be able to achieve the effect she wanted. She waved her hand. It will be fine after washing it in a while. It won't touch much sand and stone. Jingwan worked quickly. The big and small succulents were uneven. Finally, she added 2 stones and even bitter wood roots. She clapped her hands and was done. Amazing. The so-called turning something rotten into something magical is nothing more than this. Diwu Taiching praised. This small bonsai might not be their favorite, but it was exquisite and had a different kind of beauty. His granddaughter liked things like this. The onlookers couldn't help but praise, and the stall owner was the most excited because he saw an infinite business opportunity in it. He got these things from the north because they didn't have them here. Unfortunately, no one cared about them. He wanted to wait for 2 days and throw them away. Who would have thought that things would take a turn? Chapter 37. Jingwan nodded. In her opinion, this miniature bonsai was rather crude. She could make a good one when she went back. She asked the stall owner a few more things. Next time, bring some back and send them to the Luo residents. In addition, you can also look for other. Jingwan told him about the cactus-type succulents. If you see them, bring them back together. I want them all. If there are a lot of them, you can also sell them yourself. This small bonsai is very simple. You can understand it at a glance, right? Jingwan smiled. The stall owner was quite embarrassed to be seen through by a girl from the boudoir. What the stall owner didn't know was that this kind of inconspicuous little thing would quickly become popular in the inner courtyard of the capital. He had only eaten it 2 or 3 times before the big shots in the industry came to his door. Fortunately, he made a lot of money from it. As for the inconspicuous little succulents, they went from being worthless to having a high net worth. Jingwan didn't care much about these things. She washed her hands with cold water. Usually, she washed her hands with warm water at all times. This made Nurse Gong quite concerned. Qing Zhu also muttered a few words. Jingwan was helpless. Old man Luo, you have such a granddaughter. Why haven't I heard you mention it? When they were at home, their children and grandchildren would naturally do everything possible to be filial. It was inevitable that they would cater to their preferences. If they really met a junior who was intelligent in this aspect, no matter what the original purpose was, they would definitely be happy. Then, it was normal to pull her out from time to show off to others. This girl from the Luo family was not as simple as being intelligent, but they had never heard old man Luo mention it. Seeing that her grandfather seemed to be prepared to be cold to the end, Jingwan opened her mouth and said, "My daughter has been living with grandmother in Qian Prefecture. A few days ago, I came to the capital with grandmother." No wonder. Diwu Taiching stroked his beard and nodded. His thoughts changed. "Girl, do you know the few pots of flowers your grandfather mentioned?" Jingwan looked at Luo Peishan and found it quite funny. "My daughter raised them when she was in Qian Prefecture. This time, she brought them to the capital." Diwu Taiching's beard broke several times in succession. If this continued, his beard would fall off sooner or later. His heart ached when he saw it, but he continued to touch it and drop it from time to time. He looked at Luo Peishan with hidden bitterness in his eyes. "Lord Luo, you are full of confidence now." Luo Peishan puffed out his chest. That's right, he was very confident now. "My third daughter also has a one-of-a-kind tri-colored peony." Seeing Diwu Taiching continue to cut off his beard, he felt especially relieved. Jingwan really wanted to say, "Grandfather, take it easy. What's the big deal about being unique? If you know how it was done, you really don't care." However, looking at Luo Peishan's childish behavior, Jingwan chose to keep her mouth shut. "Greetings to the 2 lords. This student has taken the liberty to disturb you." Sun Yilin, who had turned around when he heard their conversation, paused for a moment before he finally stepped forward. He bowed to Jingwan beside him. Jingwan squatted down to return the greeting. "Son of the Sun family, are you not at His Majesty's side today?" Luo Peishan asked. It was just a simple inquiry. There was no other meaning. Among these juniors, Sun Yilin was the one they liked the most, but also the one they hated the most. The 2 reasons were naturally because of flowers and trees. Duke Dinggua's mansion had great power and could always get some famous things that they couldn't get. However, this brat was stingy and refused to exchange the real rare treasures with them. This student is just a pawn and insignificant. His Majesty is very kind, so I don't need to accompany him every day. Even if he was put in an important position, he had to do it step by step. His starting point was much higher than others, so he wasn't in a hurry. You came alone? Diwu Taiching said as if he was joking. Everyone in the capital knew that the fifth son of Duke Dinggua's mansion was almost infatuated with flowers. Therefore, he liked to go to the flower market from time to time. Those ladies who admired him naturally flocked to try to have a chance encounter. They might be able to say that they had a common interest. If they could be connected by fate because of this, it couldn't be better. It was no wonder that when Li Ruyu heard that Sun Yilin talked to Jingwan because of flowers in Duke Dinggua's mansion, her reaction was so big. Because they all knew that the possibility of Sun Yilin liking a girl because of flowers and trees was very high. Although there had been countless girls who had sent flowers and trees to him through other people's hands, the result was nothing definite. Li Ruyu was still vigilant at all times. Sun Yilin knew his situation, but he had long been accustomed to it. Today, I mainly came out to accompany my sister for a walk. Sun Yijia's marriage was a hot topic. In addition, her marriage was related to the situation of the imperial court. Therefore, it was not surprising that Luo Peishan and the others also knew about it. Because it happened to be at the corner of two streets, the Sun siblings actually came from another street. Obviously, Sun Yijia most likely went to change clothes at this time. Sure enough, not long after, Sun Yijia came out of the brothel next to them. After Sun Yijia greeted the two elders, she greeted Jingwan. She didn't say anything, but her gaze paused on Jingwan's face. Jingwan returned a smile. However, Jingwan probably didn't know that Sun Yijia still had an impression of her. This impression was quite deep. This impression didn't come from the person Li Ruyu was looking for trouble with. It came from the time when they parted. The situation at that time was quite special. Even if it was a hurried glance, it was always easier to remember. Naturally, the number of people going to the flower market together increased. Sun Yilin was itching for the tri-colored peony, but now wasn't the time to ask. He could only suppress his thoughts and chat with the two elders about their mutual love. Jingwan and Sun Yijia walked together. They didn't talk much, mainly because Sun Yijia wasn't in a good mood. It was obvious that her family was only concerned about how much benefit she could bring to the Empress and King Kang after her marriage. They never considered whether she would be happy or not. Even if she had already accepted her fate, she would still be sad. Compared to the previous street, this street was much more orderly. It also looked more classy. From the stalls, there were shops. There were even 2-story and 3-story buildings everywhere. Miss Sun, look at those flowers. Aren't they beautiful? Look at those plants. Don't they look lively? Jingwan and the others suddenly said to Sun Yijia as they followed the elders into a flower shop with all kinds of flowers. Sun Yijia didn't know what she meant, but she still looked in the direction she was pointing. It didn't seem different from what she usually saw. Did you know that they grew in the wild in the beginning? When they were dug up, no one knew if they were willing or not. They also didn't know what they would be facing. If they were like flowers that could think like humans, their first reaction might be fear and uneasiness because they were worried that they would be used as firewood and burned. But in reality, that wasn't the case. They received better and more meticulous care. They grew prettier and were loved by the world. However, the process of going from the wild to domesticated is actually not that beautiful. The most painful thing is the change of environment. The ones in front of us all tried their best to change and adapt. As for those that couldn't adapt, they withered and withered long ago. Jingwan's voice was gentle and unhurried. How could Sun Yijia not understand what Jingwan meant? When one's fate was controlled by others, why should one be worried about walking down a dead end? It wasn't as if one didn't have a choice at all. Try your best to adapt and live a good life, or be disheartened and let things slide. If she chose the former, she might find that she was better than before. Even if she couldn't, she was a girl from Ding General Manor. It was not impossible for her to enjoy herself. If she chose the latter, even if others wanted to, they would give up because of her indifference. They would become dim, decline, and disappear silently. Sun Yijia's tears rolled down her cheeks like a broken string of beads. No one in the family had ever told her these things. Other than her brother, who was closest to her, no one could tell what she was thinking. However, her brother couldn't comfort her. She thought that she didn't need anything and just lived day by day. In fact, that wasn't the case. She had been wandering in the dark, lost. She needed someone to show her the way, but this person came so suddenly and unexpectedly. Chapter 38. Jingwan wiped her tears with a handkerchief and said with a smile, "Girls are made of water. Don't cry too much. Otherwise, you'll be like those flowers. Without water, they won't be beautiful anymore. It's okay to cry once in a while, but you have to find the right person to cry to. You have to cry to the person who cares for you." She winked as she spoke. Sun Ijia smiled through her tears and quickly wiped away her tears. Because she didn't put on any makeup, she didn't have to worry about her makeup being smudged. Her eyes wouldn't turn red in such a short time. Sun Ijia quickly returned to normal, but compared to before, she looked much more energetic. The whole process actually only took a short time. Even if others noticed, they would only take a few glances at most. Sun Yilin heaved a huge sigh of relief. He was also very happy. Diwu Taiching approached Luo Peishan. "It's a pity that your granddaughter didn't give birth to a boy." This old man also felt that it was a pity before. "However, I don't feel that it's a pity anymore. She's quite good the way she is now." Sun Ijia suddenly became close to Jingwan. She changed from the unfamiliar Miss Luo to little sister Wan. She smiled intimately. It was probably because Jingwan saw through her thoughts and thought that Jingwan and she actually had similar temperaments. However, Jingwan was open-minded and had a candid nature that she didn't reveal. She was much better than Sun Ijia, who was always sad and sad. Although Sun Ijia called Jingwan little sister Wan, she actually treated Jingwan as her older sister. Because Jingwan was able to comfort her, it formed a kind of dependence that Sun Ijia herself didn't even notice. She also said everything to Jingwan. She didn't have the slightest bit of the arrogance of a cold and aloof flower. Because the change was too fast, Jingwan actually felt a little uncomfortable for a moment. However, seeing Sun Ijia like this was better than her gradually sinking into numbness. During the conversation, Sun Ijia discovered that Jingwan actually knew more about flowers than her fifth brother. In her opinion, it was simply unbelievable. "Little sister Wan, you're amazing. I thought that no one could compare to my fifth brother in this aspect, not even those old adults. I didn't expect you to be even better. It's true that there's always someone better than you. Big sister Jiu, you flatter me." "Alright," Sun Ijia forced her to call her that. "It's just that I've read a lot of related books and planted a lot of plants myself. Naturally, I know all this. I've also learned a lot from my fifth brother, but he always despises me for being clumsy and says that I'm ruining his things. It's clearly his fault for not teaching me well." Sun Ijia was right beside him. As his younger sister, was it really okay for her to speak ill of him so openly? Sun Ijia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't know that there was a saying, even when lying down, you still get shot. Luo Peishan originally thought that he wouldn't be able to harvest anything today. However, when they were resting in the tea house, he looked at the small basket that Qingzhu was carrying. He lifted the handkerchief on top and was stunned to see a few branches and an orchid that had been determined to die. Jingwan naturally noticed his actions. She smiled meaningfully and didn't say anything. Luo Peishan also seemed to understand. He acted as if nothing had happened, but in reality, he didn't understand anything. Jingwan didn't know that the man who had been secretly watching her was also in a private room on the third floor. Li Hongyuan was upstairs just now. He saw Jingwan through the slightly open window. This time, he didn't deliberately come to see Jingwan. It was purely a coincidence. He was here on business. However, he was rather surprised to see Jingwan and Sun Ijia holding hands and looking very intimate. There should be something that he didn't know. However, things had changed from the beginning. In that case, Jingwan only had one more friend. This person's character was not bad, so there was nothing to be surprised about. Moreover, this was beneficial to his original plan. Li Hongyuan indeed wouldn't have thought that in his previous life, when Princess Kang passed away due to illness, Sun Yijia, as Prince Kang's fiancée, felt deeply guilty. She silently fasted and prayed for Princess Kang at home for 49 days. She didn't step out of Duke Dinggua's fu half a step. Naturally, today's chance meeting with Jingwan in the flower market wouldn't have happened. Moreover, Jingwan wouldn't have comforted her, so how could they become friends? Similarly, in his previous life, Jingwan didn't have any friendship with anyone in Duke Dinggua's fu. If she had a good relationship with Sun Yijia, Li Ruyu wouldn't have been able to plot against Jingwan so easily in Duke Dinggua's fu. In this life, Li Ruyu wouldn't be able to plot against Jingwan. Even if she got too close to Jingwan, she would be strangled. "Master, it's starting over there." An Yi quietly appeared and reported respectfully. "If WN and the others go over there to join in the fun, protect her as the first priority." He paused. "Luo Peishan will do the same." "Yes." Jingwan and the others didn't sit for long before they heard that in the 100 Flowers building not far away, someone was shamelessly boasting that they were going to select the most popular flower. The two old officials naturally didn't care. The famous flower that could become the most popular flower must be in their hands. They wouldn't take out their treasures for others to select. What was the difference between that and playing to the gallery? The people who came here were all lovers of flowers and plants. At first, most of them naturally snorted disdainfully. However, when they heard that there was a black peony that was as black as ink and as fine as silk, everyone, including Jingwan and the others, had a strange expression on their faces. "Black peony?" Jingwan whispered softly. She wasn't sure if it was really as black as ink and had a very beautiful luster like the previous orchid. The black peonies in her previous life were only very dark in color. Most of them were purplish red. Could it be that she would see a species that she had never seen before today? "Grandfather, let's go take a look." Since his granddaughter said so, Luo Shongshu reluctantly agreed. Jingwan found it funny. She didn't know why they were so awkward. If they wanted to see, they could go and see. It was that simple. By the time Jingwan and the others arrived, there were already many people gathered in the 100 Flowers building, both inside and outside. If it weren't for Luo Peishan and the 5th Taiching's high positions, and the special identities of Sun Yilin and his sister, they really wouldn't have been able to enter. Identity and status could not only be used as entrance tickets, but also more substantial benefits. For example, right now, the building was originally densely packed with people, but their group was able to get a private room. Drinking small cups of tea, the environment was elegant enough, and they had a panoramic view of the situation below. After asking the servants in the private room, they found out that the so-called selection of the courtesan belle was actually a competition between two parties. Moreover, it was the two princes, the third Prince Rui Prince and the fourth Prince Gong Prince's brother-in-law, the real brother-in-law, and their respective Wang Fei's younger brother. This was interesting. The Gong Prince's biological mother was only a concubine, but she had Qin Shu Fei behind her. Qin Shu Fei had no children, but the Qin family behind her was the newly established Marquis of Champion's Mansion. Her brother was the head of the left governor's mansion, holding military power. Although the fourth prince wasn't officially raised by Qin Shu Fei, he basically grew up in Qin Shu Fei's Sweet Dew Palace. The Gong Prince's Wang Fei also came from the Marquis of Champion's Mansion, and was the left governor's daughter. This seemed to be just a competition between two people, but in fact, it involved the two princes or the two imperial concubines in the palace, or even a competition between the two forces. At least, that was what Luo Peishan and Diwu Taiching thought. Only Li Hongyuan sneered in his heart. Most people in the court thought that the empress and imperial concubine Su were rivals, but in fact, the empress was weaker. After all, the right governor was a member of imperial concubine Su's maternal uncle's family, and also held military power. Although Duke Ding's mansion had monstrous power, they didn't have military power. Sometimes, military power was the deciding factor. However, no one knew that the left governor's true allegiance was to the first prince, Kang Wang. The empress didn't look as strong as imperial concubine Su, but that woman shouldn't be underestimated. Qin Shu Fei was actually a sensible person, she knew her brother's decision. In the harem, she seemed to be fighting, but in fact, she didn't do anything. Even the so-called support for the fourth prince, the Gong Prince, was just a show for others to see. She was a pitiful chess piece who thought she had the ability to fight for the throne, but in fact, she didn't have anything. Therefore, Qin Shufei was relatively low-key in the harem, and she wasn't as favored as imperial concubine Su. However, the Empress and imperial concubine Su didn't dare to provoke her easily. The Empress knew that she was on their side, and imperial concubine Su was afraid of her brother, the left governor. However, these were all situations where Li Hongyuan didn't intervene. In his previous life, he was able to become the final winner. Part of the reason was that the left governor rebelled against the Empress's faction and sided with him. In this life, the left governor had long been in his hands. Chapter 39. Following such an unpredictable master was simply like treading on thin ice. It could not be more tiring, but they did not dare to have any rebellious thoughts. If you could not be used by him, you would probably be killed directly. But if you submitted to him and had a rebellious heart, then your life would be worse than death, and the people behind you would also not have a good end. As for hiding it from him, you can try to see if you have the ability to fool his heavenly eyes. That's right, in this Qin's opinion, Jin Qinwang has the ability to reach the heavens. Jingwan was not interested in the bustle below, as well as the people on both sides attacking each other. She only wanted to know if she could really see the treasure that she had never seen before. The process of waiting was rather boring. Wn Maimai cares so much about that black peony. Sun Yijia actually did not understand their attachment to those flowers and trees. Just like people who like jewels and jade, if they suddenly hear that there is a beautiful jewel that they have never seen before, it is inevitable that their heart will itch. Even if they can't take it for themselves, they still want to feast their eyes on it. If it is the same as expected, they will probably be satisfied and gratified. If there is a difference, they will probably be disappointed. And before they see it, they will be expectant, anxious, perturbed and so on. In short, they really care about it. Sun Yijia nodded, more or less understanding this feeling. Most people would be like this when faced with something they like. She herself had also experienced it before. The only difference was that the intensity of that feeling was different. It seems that the stupid things that fifth brother did before can be pardoned. I will not make fun of him in the future. Sun Yilin was once again innocently implicated. Jingwan smiled but did not say anything. When she heard the shouts below, come out, she immediately became spirited. She got up and turned her head to look. The other people's reactions were similar to hers. Two brocade-clothed men, looking like they were brought up. Their faces were white and tender, their expressions were arrogant. They did not walk properly, with some frivolity. One person was shaking a jade folding fan. Looking at the face of the fan, it should be a work of a famous master. The other person was playing with a rare amethyst bracelet. When they saw each other, they raised their heads and used their nostrils to face each other. Behind them, there were several manservants, carrying large wooden chests that were tightly covered. They walked from both sides to the round stage in the middle that was decorated with flowers. It was usually used for singing and dancing performances. The two of them seemed to be sworn enemies on a daily basis. Once again, they bickered with each other, criticizing each other from head to toe. Jingwan had a headache because of their quarrel. She didn't know why she got angry. She picked up the teacup next to her and threw it down. With a clang, it became quiet. The onlookers also quieted down. Almost simultaneously, they all looked in the direction where the teacup was thrown. Jingwan also knew that she had done something stupid because she was anxious. Because there was something blocking her, it was too late for her to retreat immediately. She was already prepared to be watched and pointed at. Unexpectedly, a black shadow flashed in front of her and she was completely blocked. Looking at the back of the figure that was close to her, Jingwan slightly exhaled and slowly moved to the side. Jingwan smiled embarrassedly at the meaningful gazes of the others. Luo Peishan pointed at her from afar. You, grandfather really thought you were a steady person. Who would have thought that there would be times when you would be willful? If it wasn't for this brat's quick reaction, what would you be doing now? Granddaughter won't comment on things that didn't happen, Jingwan said shamelessly. Yes, Thank you for your grandmother's teachings. Everyone was amused by her shameless behavior. It's okay, it's okay. Little girl, it's understandable for you to be impulsive occasionally, Diwu Taiching said. Sun Yilin also turned around and smiled. He didn't care about the people below at all. As for the two main characters below, they raised their heads and wanted to curse, but when they saw Sun Yilin, they shut their mouths embarrassedly. Sun Yilin was a young master like them. Their age was about the same. Sun Yilin was born noble, and they were also born noble. However, when facing Sun Yilin, they were inferior. Moreover, he was the one who was ostracized. There was no other reason other than that Sun Yilin was the other family's child that all their elders talked about. He was the most hated one. When going against him, they were always the ones in the wrong. How could young Master Sun do such a thing? It couldn't be worse. You two, don't keep me in suspense. Quickly open it and let everyone have a look. Also, let this humble one see. Sun Yilin finally looked them in the eye. He was truly a noble young master, making the two below look useless. Although they really didn't want to give him any face, if they really did that, they definitely wouldn't have a good ending. Those sisters who admired this brat were simply unreasonable. Even if they were enemies, they would still be hot-headed. Perhaps one of them was in the brothel right now. Qin Tianming's youngest son. In terms of family background, he was better than the younger brother of Princess Rui, Lady Liu. After all, although the person with the highest position in the Liu family was an inner cabinet elder, he was the last of the 4 cabinet elders and had no title. At this time, young Master Qin didn't hold back. I'll go first. Before young Master Liu could speak, he directly asked someone to open the wooden box. He said it lightly, but the person who opened it wasn't. If he wasn't careful and damaged the treasure inside, even 10 lives wouldn't be enough to compensate. Perhaps young Master Liu was confident in his own flower. Even when he heard that it was an ink peony, he didn't care. He looked quite leisurely, or perhaps he was waiting for his famous flower to amaze everyone. The ink peony, which was widely discussed, finally appeared. It was a flower that only reached the height of a person's chest. Indeed, there were a few sparse ink peonies, but the flower shape wasn't big and the color was somewhat dark. Perhaps the rumors were too exaggerated and didn't reach the expected height. Although people were surprised that such a species really existed, in fact, they didn't have an exaggerated reaction. No matter how rare it was, its appearance wasn't good enough to attract people's attention. Young Master Qin was so angry that his face turned red. He didn't expect that the treasure that he thought he was sure to win was not valued by others. He didn't even know that he had bragged too much. If the crowd didn't know at the beginning and it suddenly appeared, it would definitely shock some people. In anger, he kicked the person beside him. Young Master Liu sneered. You dare to call yourself a top flower? Take a good look. Perhaps because they were disappointed with the ink peony, they were looking forward to young Master Qin's flower. They were all guessing what it would be. Looking at young Master Liu's expression, perhaps it was the real treasure. When the wooden box was opened, everyone was really shocked. It was also a peony, but the difference was that this peony was not only in good condition, but also blooming red, pink, and white flowers. They were evenly and scattered, and each flower was unusually delicate. It was no worse than the 4 famous peonies. This was a real rare treasure. Almost everyone in the field showed an infatuated look. On the contrary, Jingwan's expression was cold and even indifferent. She didn't care about the peony, but when her eyes fell on the ink peony, they showed gentleness. Sister Wan, you don't like the tri-colored peony? Sun Yijia didn't particularly like flowers and trees, but she loved them very much. Sister Wan's reaction was wrong. Didn't she see that her 5th brother's eyes were glued to the tri-colored peony? Hearing this, the others came back to their senses. When they saw Jingwan's expression, they all felt that something was wrong. Luo Peishan thought about his granddaughter's pot of multicolored peonies. It seemed to be red, white, and pink. Was it because she thought that her peony was unique, but when she saw another one, she was unhappy? Or was it because his peony was not as good as this one? However, Luo Peishan didn't think his granddaughter was such a narrow-minded person. Sun Yilin also thought of a similar problem. Perhaps because he liked Jingwan from the beginning, he didn't think she was narrow-minded. Instead, he wanted to comfort her. Jingwan looked up and saw their different expressions. She couldn't help but laugh. I just feel that it's a pity that such a good white peony was ruined by them. Luo Peishan's expression became serious. He said, "Girl, what do you mean? White peony? Then what's with the pink and red peony?" Sun Yilin frowned slightly. He seemed to have thought of something and his expression became a little ugly. "It was dyed. But I don't know who did it. It really looks like it. Also, it's not the peak of the peony season yet. It's already a good trick to be able to bloom so beautifully. Unfortunately, I don't think it will last long." The feeling of being fooled and deceived arose spontaneously. No one doubted Jingwan's words. Other than believing in her character, Luo Peishan also trusted her judgment. Besides, it was actually quite easy to verify. No matter how realistic the dye was, it was still fake. Chapter 40. Coincidentally, the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet, Wan Ruiz Hong, the Minister of Rights, Luo Peishan, and the Minister of Supreme Court, the fifth Taiqing, all belonged to the neutral faction. Among the neutral members, the three of them did not have the highest status, but their official positions were the highest. Because of this, among the officials who liked flowers and trees, the three of them were the closest. To be able to stand alone in the cruel struggle for the throne was a problem in itself. Luo Peishan not only had means, but also his position and other factors. It seemed that he was just struggling on the edge of the quagmire. Perhaps he would be forced to sink into it soon. Diwu Taiqing looked like a sissy, but he was really a hard bone to chew. He was absolutely a pure official who was only loyal to the emperor. He was really smelly and stubborn when it came to official affairs. He did not give face to anyone. Therefore, if there was a big case, it would be best if the Ministry of Justice could handle it. It should not be handed over to him. However, such a person was not the sharpest knife in the emperor's hand. Because he was fair, even if the emperor wanted to use him to get rid of some people, it would not work if there was no factual evidence. As for Prime Minister Wan Ruiz Hong, he really had his own ability. He could get benefits from both sides, but he was not the kind of person who was a peacemaker. He dealt with things smoothly, but he was not soft. Even Li Hongyuan was convinced of his ability. Such a good thing, let's give it to Pavilion Elder Wan. Let's not fight for it. Diwu Taiqing said with a smile. Luo Peishan also smiled and agreed. Because it was fake, it was likely that this pot of peony would not be seen in the future. When it was close, it was easy for experts to tell whether it was real or fake. Therefore, it was only used as bait to attract fish. As long as the fish came close, it would make others think that the fish had chosen a direction. Wan Ruiz Hong would not let some people get what they wanted, but he had to do something for this tricolored peony. He knew that it was fake, but he did not tell him. Pavilion Elder Wan's joke was too rare. He did not give Prince Rui any benefits, but wanted to get the peony. Prince Rui was tired of dealing with it. It was also good fun. Fake. In the private room next door, Li Hongyuan, who entered through a secret door, murmured in a low voice. Indeed, only WNWAN can raise such a rare and peerless item. In his previous life, a pot of tricolored peony had caused a sensation. Li Hongyuan also knew the purpose of Li Hongming, Lord Rui. He really wanted to catch Luo Peishan, but Luo Peishan remained indifferent from the beginning to the end. Now that he thought about it, it should also be on this day in his previous life. WAN saw the problem, so naturally, Luo Peishan did not take action, and so did the fifth Grand Minister. However, Sun Yilin had taken action. Everyone thought that he did not get what he wanted because he was on the Empress's side and had a hostile relationship with Lord Rui. Thinking about it, Sun Yilin was not here today in his previous life, so he did not know the truth. Wan Ruiz Hong and Li Hongming tangled for a while, but the result was unknown, because the appearance of another pot of tricolored peony covered up this matter. After all, many people had personally touched the peony that WNWAN took out. According to Li Hongming's character, He should have kept a close eye on Wan. However, perhaps before he could do anything, Wan had already been schemed against by Li Ruyu. Thinking about it this way, Wan's fate was really full of misfortune. There was a wolf in front and a tiger behind. Without him, it would be impossible. After coming to this conclusion, Li Hongyuan naturally made some arrangements or changes to the layout of the plan. Grandfather, buy that pot of black peony. Bang! Before Jingwan could finish her words, Mr. Qin kicked the black peony over. The pot was smashed, the soil scattered, and the peony fell to the ground, dropping many leaves and petals. Jingwan's heart ached. She turned around and seemed to want to go downstairs. Girl, don't worry. Looking at its appearance, other than you, there aren't many people who want it. When the matter is over, it won't be difficult to get it back. Hearing this, Jingwan could only calm her mind. Li Hongyuan saw her expression from the dark hole and his face sank. Have Qin Tianming come see Ben Wang tonight? Yes. An Yi replied. If the son doesn't teach, the father is to blame. This was a typical example. However, Qin Tianming was even more miserable. At least if it was another person, he wouldn't be so angry that he would suffer. When facing the future Wang Fei, Master's heart was smaller than the tip of a needle. That flower wasn't Miss Luo's to begin with. He only showed that he wanted it. His heart ached when he saw the flower suffer, but this person looked like he wanted to cut her into 8 pieces. As for those who really made a move against Miss Luo, An Yi didn't dare imagine what their future would be like. In another part of the same street, 3 groups of people were staging a battle called The Mantis Stalks the Cicada, unaware of the Oriole behind. Prince Rui inadvertently learned that in this flower market, the Gong Prince had hidden a stronghold. Inside, there seemed to be some shameful things. From the beginning, Prince Kang knew about this stronghold and the Gong Prince's movements like the back of his hand. He didn't uproot it because he wanted to get more information. Who wouldn't like something that didn't require him to expend effort and also had many benefits? When Prince Rui arranged for today's flower battle, Prince Kang was aware of it and naturally beat him at his own game. Prince Rui's people were almost completely annihilating the Gong Prince's people. While they were rummaging through the Gong Prince's people, a group of black-clothed people suddenly attacked. Although Prince Rui had already made arrangements, he still suffered some losses. In addition, Prince Kang sent more people. In a flash, Prince Rui's people fell into a dangerous situation. One of them desperately escaped under the cover of the others. Seeing that the Oriole was about to peck the mantis to death, a black hand quietly appeared. These people were well organized, skilled in martial arts, and ruthless. Soon, everyone was cleaned up, and the people who entered the building quickly came out. Both sides nodded to each other. Although the left governor Qin Tianming submitted to Prince Kang, the champion Marquis household behind him still supported the Gong Prince. Therefore, although the Gong Prince was just a pitiful worm, he still had some useful things in his hands. A fire was quickly retreating. Almost at the same time, the most densely populated by Hualu and several other places were also on fire. The fire was too big, burning too fiercely. Bai Hualu was instantly incomparably chaotic. Even the boudoirs desperately tried to squeeze out. One person carelessly fell to the ground, and the people behind rushed over. Screams, cries for help, screams. Jingwan was also a little frightened by this sudden disaster, but she knew that at this time she needed to be calm. She absolutely couldn't panic. Just as she was about to say something, her mouth and nose were covered by a wet handkerchief. Miss, quickly leave. Grandfather, miss, don't worry, there's someone by Master's side. Gong Mama led Jingwan outside. The others followed closely behind her. However, the wooden staircase leading downstairs was blocked by the people coming down from upstairs. This kind of pushing and shoving was the most dangerous. Moreover, Jing Wn realized that other than Granny Gong, the others had disappeared. It was obvious that they had been separated. Jingwan tightly held onto Gong Mama. Although she was extremely worried, she also knew that now wasn't the time to turn back and look for people. In the chaos, her head seemed to have been accidentally hit by someone, and in a flash she felt a little dizzy. Before Jingwan lost consciousness, she seemed to feel her body leave the ground and rise into the air. She wanted to struggle, but was ruthlessly pulled into the darkness. Her own miss was kidnapped in her own hands. How could she? But in a flash, Gong Mema thought of something, but she didn't stop. She held onto the railing and jumped down after the person in black in front of her. She was agile and vigorous, completely unlike a woman in her 40s. Then, she chased after the person and left through the back door. The backyard of 100 Flowers Tower was a 3-sectioned house. It wasn't very big, but it wasn't small either. Although it wasn't as chaotic as the front, it was still smoky and not much better. Gong Mema couldn't see the person who took Jingwan away, but she didn't stop walking. She walked straight in a certain direction. After leaving the vicinity of 100 Flowers Tower, Gong Mema sniffed carefully. Then, she found the horse carriage 2 lanes away. Chapter 41. Yi looked at that familiar yet unfamiliar face. Sure enough, it was a good method. She only changed her face a bit and it looked like another person. But as long as she wanted to, she could use that completely different face to let people who were familiar with her original appearance recognize her at a glance. As expected of the female protector, you found me so quickly. Call me Mama Gong. She was too lazy to pay attention to Yi. The incense used by the young lady, although it was made by the young lady in the beginning, it was all made by her. She couldn't be more familiar with it. With her sensitive nose, how could she not smell it? If she still couldn't find it, how incompetent would she be? She looked at the carriage and frowned. Wang, the young lady's reputation is very important. Please think more about the young lady. Yi was a bit displeased. Female protector, that is the master. How can you be so rude? Call me Mama Gong. 2 years ago, when I was sent to Qian Manor, my master changed. That is the Luo family's 3rd young lady, the only one. Yi thought of his master and closed his mouth. Li Hongyuan half leaned in the carriage, holding the unconscious Jingwan in his arms. As if he was suffering from skin hunger, his fingers kept moving around her face and neck. The smooth and delicate touch seemed to make his whole body tremble. He had the impulse to rub Jingwan into his bones and blood, but when he heard Jingwan groan because of the discomfort, he subconsciously loosened his grip. Lowering his head, his lips landed on Jingwan's forehead. Gently, gently, her eyes, the bridge of her nose, the tip of her nose, her cheeks, her earlobes, and the side of her neck. His lips lingered on and finally landed on her alluring pink lips. He licked them but did not dare to go deeper because he knew that once he did, he might lose control. For so many years, he was like an ascetic monk who didn't touch women. He was very clear that once he opened a mouth, it would be like a flood breaking through a dam. When he came back to this day, 12 years had passed. He finally held her in his arms. Calculating the time, when he just came back, WN seemed to be only 2 years old. What a pity, Qian Manor was too far from the capital. Moreover, he was trapped in the palace and couldn't see the little WN. Even if he sent someone to her side, he had to wait for a full 6 years until he left the palace at the age of 16. However, if he continued to raise WN by his side, when she grew up, she probably wouldn't be the WN he wanted. This was because he knew best that the same person in different places and taught by different people could create 2 completely different people. It was also because of this point that during the 10 years that WN was in Qian Manor, especially the years after she grew up, other than secretly giving her a little help, he didn't change her life. Even if he sent Nurse Gong, other than protecting her and taking care of her body, she only taught her some common rules and etiquette. Other than that, she didn't do anything else. He was afraid that WN would no longer be the person in his memories. Fortunately, she was still her. As long as he could ensure this, he would completely change her life in the future. Their lips pressed together for a long time. Li Hongyuan let out a low sigh. Little vinegar jar, do you know how much this prince endured for you? In the future, you have to make it up to this prince. His palm seemed to unconsciously fall on Jingwan's chest. His peerless face was serious, but his hand was like an old hooligan, as if he wasn't satisfied with the size. As expected, compared to a few years later, it's still too small now. However, a green fruit should have a different taste. He licked his lips as if he was reminiscing about something. That dark gaze seemed to contain a madness that could devour everything, but also an endless tenderness and affection. His low and seductive voice made the two people outside twitch. They hated how their hearing was so good. This man was indeed abnormal. It was fine if he was crazy, but how could a grown man like him be so frivolous towards a young girl? Did he still have any shame? Another two men in black appeared one after another. One of them was holding a broken black peony. However, when they saw this scene, they stopped and didn't approach. Nurse Gong was a little anxious. If they didn't go back, the people on the other side would be anxious. Moreover, whether or not there was an accident, a young girl missing for a long time would always attract gossip. "Your Highness, how is it?" Li Hongyuan asked when Nurse Gong was about to speak. Nurse Gong breathed a sigh of relief and retreated to the side. She didn't need to listen to things that had nothing to do with her. Even if she occasionally heard one or two words, she would turn around and forget them. The two men in black quickly stepped forward. Replying to Master, "Everything has been done. We also got the things from Bai Hua Lu." The master behind Bai Hua Lu was Li Hongming. This time, he really tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it, suffering heavy losses. As for Prince Kang and the Gong Prince, they naturally didn't fare much better. In this drama, Li Hongyuan became the hunter who wiped out the first three. Li Hongyuan made a sound that was almost inaudible. After a while, he came out of the carriage with Jingwan in his arms. The other three men quickly lowered their heads. Nurse Gong stepped forward, almost snatching, and carried Jingwan over. She carefully examined Jingwan's collar and other places. She didn't find any marks, so she breathed a sigh of relief. Whether it was her words or His Highness restrained himself, she couldn't stop this man. She could only do her best to protect the young girl. Li Hongyuan's face darkened. This prince is not a ferocious beast. Nurse Gong glanced at him, as if to say, "You're more terrible than a scourge." Li Hongyuan's face darkened even more. However, Nurse Gong wasn't afraid of him. Not only because she grasped his weakness, but also because she wasn't afraid of him. It could be said that Nurse Gong watched Li Hongyuan grow up. This servant will withdraw. As for the black peony, according to His Highness's character, he would find a way to send it to the young girl. Li Hongyuan watched as Granny Gong disappeared with Jingwan. His entire body was filled with a terrifying aura. The three secret guards wished they could disappear immediately. They were already unpredictable and ruthless. In addition, they were not satisfied with their desires. How could they live? Would they really have to wait until His Highness married into the prince's family? Luo Peishan and the others spent some time together. They all had different degrees of injuries, but fortunately, they weren't serious and there were no casualties. "Where's Wan? Jingwan's maidservant, Qing Zhu, was there, but she and Granny Gong were nowhere to be seen. Luo Peishan's face sank. The fire in Hundred Flowers Tower could not be extinguished at all. If they waited for the fire to go out, they would have been burned to ashes. Qing Zhu's body went soft as if she had lost her soul. Miss. She wanted to go back to Baihua Tower. Enough. Your miss is fine. Why are you crying? Luo Peishan showed the power of his high position for many years. Go and find her. Maybe she came from somewhere else. He was still rational. He didn't let people go into the fire. Without any protection, they would definitely die. How could they save Jingwan? Sun Yilin and Sun Yijia also sent people out. They didn't believe that Jingwan was gone. No one knew that Sun Yilin's clenched hands were shaking and his heart was in a panic. Anyway, from the first time he saw that girl, she was different to him. He patted his sister who was also frightened. Stay with the two Daran and don't walk around. I'll go and find her. Sun Yijia nodded. Her hands and feet were a little cold. She was born in a noble family and had almost no real friends. Now she finally met a girl who was compatible with her. She looked no different from ordinary girls, but sometimes she was different. She lived with determination, free and easy. Sun Yijia had to admit that she yearned for her. Sun Yijia prayed in her heart, hoping that she would be safe. Chapter 42. When the two of them learned that the Minister of Rights and the Supreme Court Chancellor were also present, they hurried over to greet them. Luo Peishan's face was cold, but he didn't lose his temper. This old man's granddaughter hasn't been found yet. I'll have to trouble the city defense team to send a team to help look for her. Naturally, there wasn't a portrait for them at this time. Besides, they didn't necessarily need a portrait to find someone. The leader of the Hidden Flame Army didn't even think about it before he agreed to help. Originally, it was already somewhat selfish to ask the city defense team to help, but this Hidden Flame Army leader still wanted to curry favor. That was really dereliction of duty. Then go into 100 Flowers Tower and help this old man look. The leader of the Hidden Flame Army was almost scared out of his wits by Luo Peishan's cold gaze. My lord, please forgive me. My lords, this place is chaotic and really unsafe. Why don't we move first? He glanced at the little Jiao Jiao next to him. If anything happened to these people, it would definitely be a matter of life and death. No need. Do your own thing. From the beginning, they stood in a relatively safe corner that didn't block the way. The fire couldn't spread to this side, and it also wouldn't affect those who escaped death and left in a panic. If it weren't for the fact that two of them were old men and the other was a young lady in her boudoir, and that it was easy for something to happen in this chaos, they probably would have helped to look for her. Time passed little by little. Luo Peishan's expression became worse and worse. He was almost certain that his dear granddaughter didn't manage to leave 100 Flowers Tower. For a moment, he blamed himself. If he hadn't been greedy and wanted to bring that girl out, and if he had watched over her more, she probably wouldn't have suffered such a tragic accident. There was also his old wife. She loved Third Lass so much. How could she bear to see her child die before her own? Found her. Master, third young lady has been found. The servant's excited voice came from afar. Looking at the raging fire in 100 Flowers Tower, Luo Peishan almost despaired. For a short period of time, he even seemed to have lost his soul. The servant's voice suddenly woke him up. Where? Following the voice, he hurriedly went to greet him. Sun Yijia, who had a sad look on her face, immediately showed a happy expression and quickly followed her. Nanny Gong limped over slowly with Jingwan in her arms. Sun Yilin stood beside her to protect her. Although Nanny Gong's feet looked inconvenient, her hands were steady. What happened? Luo Peishan saw that Nurse Gong's hair was messy, and her face and body were covered with soot. Looking at her posture, he could tell that her feet were badly injured. More importantly, third young lady seemed to be unconscious. Master, please forgive me. It's all this servant's fault for not protecting Miss well. There were too many people, and when they went downstairs, Miss was accidentally bumped into. This servant was worried that she would not be able to come out for a while, and seeing that the back door was closer, I brought Miss there. Unexpectedly, the back door was just as chaotic. When they passed through the corridor, a wooden plank fell and they were pushed. This servant sprained her ankle, and Miss was knocked on her head. With Miss like this, it was inconvenient to carry her, and it took us a long time to come out. In order to cover up for both sides, Nanny Gong blurted out the time when Jingwan was unconscious, because she knew very well that Jingwan was absolutely fine. She would not be questioned about the details, but she felt quite guilty. How could she not feel guilty? If it were not for the living Yama, how could they be so embarrassed? Even if he had some kind of plan, he could have avoided them. But because of his shameful thoughts, they all suffered. Fortunately, he didn't do too much to the girl. Otherwise, she didn't know if she would be able to hold back her anger and fight with him. Although Jingwan fainted, she looked much better than Nanny Gong. Luo Peishan obviously could not blame her. Let's go back first. However, although Nanny Gong held Jingwan firmly, her feet would affect her speed and delay Jingwan's treatment. Jingwan had fainted, and no one knew how serious her injuries were. Should they change to another servant girl? Most likely, the servant girl could not carry her, and others, Master, it's better for this servant to carry him. This servant's feet are fine. In order to smooth things over, the injury on her foot must be real. However, that injury really didn't matter to her. If she let the man hug her, she didn't know what kind of madness the King of Hell would go. If it was a servant or an attendant, he would definitely secretly kill him. If it was young Master Sun, he probably wouldn't die, but he would have a bloody misfortune. Luo Peishan hesitated for a moment and nodded. The reputation of Miss was too important. He said goodbye to 5th Taiching and Sun Yilin and left in a hurry. Nanny Gong did not care about herself and left quickly. The remaining 2 parties also left separately. Sun Yijia saw his 5th brother staring absent-mindedly at the direction where Jingwan and the others left. It was extremely rare for him. Moreover, his nervousness about Jingwan was definitely not fake. Some things were already very obvious. Thinking about the last time in their family, Li Ruyu seemed to be the one who found fault with Jingwan. His 5th brother's behavior might not be because Li Ruyu's behavior really angered him. He said that he talked to someone, and it must be a woman. At that time, even if they really bumped into each other accidentally, Jingwan would not take the initiative to talk to 5th brother. It was the first time that 5th brother took the initiative to talk to a girl in the boudoir. 5th brother, I'll go to the Luo family to see Sister Wn later. Okay. Sun Yilin agreed almost without thinking. However, he seemed to think of something and frowned slightly. I just feel like old friends with Sister Wan at first sight. What's wrong with a girl in the boudoir making friends with her? You're right. I'm thinking too much. Although people from different factions were influenced by their elders and the younger generation rarely became good friends, it was not impossible. They might have to be careful when making friends with men, but it was really not a big deal when making friends with women, especially unmarried women. 5th brother, you're confused because you're too concerned, Sun Yijia said with a smile. Sun Yilin saw Sun Yijia's teasing gaze and knew what she was thinking. He coughed to cover it up. Don't think too much. Sun Yijia's smile became even more meaningful. However, it quickly disappeared. I agree with Sister Wan's words. However, if she's the daughter of the Luo family's eldest son, there might be a little possibility. Her marriage was controlled by others and her 5th brother could not get his way. Even if she thought it through, it was inevitable that she would feel depressed. It did not matter if she did not have someone she liked. However, if she did have someone she liked but could not get what she wanted, she would definitely feel bitter. Don't worry. I know what to do. Sun Yilin saw that his sister had exposed him and did not try to hide it anymore. Anyway, when he saw that she was still alive, he had already confirmed some thoughts. There was no dejection in his words. Instead, he was rather confident. The first thing that came to Sun Yilin's mind was, could it be that his 5th brother was preparing to ask the emperor for a marriage? Based on how much the emperor doted on him, this was not impossible. His eyes could not help but brighten. Who could stop the emperor's edict? Sun Yilin's backing was naturally not the emperor. As the emperor, no one knew how long his favor and trust would last. The emperor was a wise ruler, and his temperament was not unpredictable. However, Sun Yilin had never thought of taking the initiative to ask for anything from him. Grandmother would help him, but it was not urgent for the time being. That would have to wait until after his sister was engaged. However, Sun Yilin still felt guilty towards his sister and hesitated whether he should tell her about it. Let's go. Let's go back first. As the only fish that escaped the net, a certain shadow guard was seriously injured. He hastily treated his injuries, changed his clothes, and forced himself to enter Prince Rui's residence. Chapter 43. Originally, Li Hongming was waiting for the good news in the study. He was calmly practicing calligraphy. When the hidden guard entered, he didn't even look up. Where's the thing? Your Highness, please forgive us. The mission failed. We were ambushed. Our brothers all died in order to protect us. Li Hongming suddenly tightened his grip on the brush. In an instant, the veins on the back of his hand bulged. He clenched his teeth and his face was ashen. He was obviously suppressing his anger. In the end, he didn't succeed. He slammed the brush on the desk and angrily flipped the things on the desk. Trash. The hidden guard knelt on the ground. He endured the severe pain and didn't make a sound. Li Hongming turned the desk and kicked it. The hidden guard was kicked to the ground, but he struggled to get up and still knelt upright. Li Hongming saw the dark red blood on the ground and didn't kick a second time. Speak, what happened? The hidden guard clearly recounted the situation in full detail. He was impartial and didn't have the slightest mixed emotions. Li Hongming was almost certain who did it, but he still wanted to confirm further. He didn't want to jump to conclusions based on his own guesses. Do you know the background of the other party? It's Prince Kang's men. One of them has fought with this subordinate before. Although I haven't seen his face, this subordinate is very sure of his background. Li Hongming clenched his fists. Li Hongyi, this prince underestimated you. I originally thought that you were just a defeated opponent. I didn't expect that after years of hunting, you would be pecked in the eye by an eagle. Good, very good. Let's wait and see. Go and recuperate. Yes, this subordinate will take his leave. The hidden guard got up, but he suddenly felt dizzy. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he fell to the ground. Because of the pain, he clenched his teeth and his whole body couldn't stop convulsing. Although he was still conscious, it was likely that he wouldn't make it. Why haven't you called a doctor yet? Li Hongming angrily said. This person was one of his elite soldiers. He was very distressed that so many of his men had died. He saw that he was still useful, so he didn't punish him. But this was the result. The mansion doctor hurried over. After taking his pulse, his complexion wasn't good. Your Highness, the poison has penetrated deep into your organs. There is no saving you. Li Hongyuan looked at the black blood on the ground and finally reacted. An endless storm was brewing in his eyes. Send him on his way. Thank you, Your Highness. The pain of the poison was not something an ordinary person could endure. It was better to die quickly. From Li Hongming's point of view, this was Prince Kang's way of not leaving anyone alive. In reality, Li Hongyuan knew that Li Hongming was very suspicious, so he left someone to pass him the evidence. However, it was not easy to train a hidden guard. Naturally, it was better to have one less hidden guard. With this, Li Hongming was completely unaware that the people who surrounded and killed his subordinates were all dead. Naturally, he was even more certain that it was Prince Kang's doing. Although the item in 100 Flowers Tower wasn't particularly important, it was still a weakness that could be used against him. If it wasn't handled well, it could cause him to lose more power. As for the situation over there, he still wasn't clear. Li Hongming was considering whether to send someone to investigate and see if it was possible to bring the item back. Or should he simply give up on that part of his power and clean up the mess to better protect himself? No matter what choice he made, his losses were certain. The only thing he could do was to minimize the losses as much as possible. Your Highness, young Master Liu requests an audience. Li Hongming didn't have a good impression of his brother-in-law. However, he still needed his help occasionally, so it wasn't good to reject him. Moreover, he might know something about the situation. The hidden guard's corpse had already been taken away, and the blood on the ground had been wiped clean. Please come in. Brother-in-law. Perhaps he was used to being casual, but he didn't even greet him when he came in. He grabbed the teapot and poured himself a cup of tea, then gulped it down in 2 gulps. Li Hongming looked at him, his eyes clouded over. What happened? Young Master Liu eloquently recounted everything that had happened. He kept saying bad luck and bad luck. Li Hongming listened patiently, but there was only one conclusion. This idiot didn't provide any useful information other than bringing out the fake tricolor peony. However, was Sun Yilin's existence a coincidence, or was it Li Hongyi's deliberate arrangement? If it was the former, then there was nothing to say. If it was the latter, then what was his motive? Li Hongming sent his brother-in-law away, but he also decided to give up on Baihua Tower. Li Hongyi's people might still be watching over them. If he caught something that could be used against them, then the losses would outweigh the gains. Thinking of cutting off his tail to survive, Li Hongming's heart bled. He swore that he would make up for it 100 times over from Li Hongyi. Who would have thought that Li Hongming's anger would only be stronger than his? He thought that his plan was flawless, but in the end, he still fell into Li Hongming's trap. Although he didn't lose anything important, the loss of his hidden guards made his heart ache. More importantly, he was still angry that he couldn't scheme against Li Hongming. His imperial father valued Li Hongming more, and the courtiers thought that Li Hongming was stronger than him. However, every time he fought with him, he lost more than he won. That kind of unwillingness and resentment sometimes drove him crazy. Because Luo Peishan sent someone back to report ahead of time, when they returned to the Luo family, including old Madame Luo, was waiting outside the gate. When they left, they were still fine. How long had it been? But now they were all in a mess. Master. Old Madame Luo, who had always been calm, couldn't hold it in anymore. She quickly walked forward and grabbed Luo Peishan's arm. Are you hurt? Luo Peishan patted her hand comfortingly. I'm fine. The most important thing is the third girl. Send her back first and let the doctor take a look at her. Old Madame Luo naturally saw Nurse Gong, who was about to get out of the carriage with Jingwan in her arms. The servant who came back earlier said that the third girl had fainted. It was quite frightening. What are you waiting for? Hurry and help the third girl down. Old Madame Luo hurriedly sent Jingwan back to the begonia house. The old doctor in the mansion was already waiting for her. Jingwan was in the inner chamber. Other than the servants by her side, only her mother, Madame Zhong, was there. The other mistresses in the mansion were all gathered outside. Because old Madame Luo was there, no one dared to say anything. Even people like Luo Jingying, whether they were gloating in their hearts or cursing Jingwan for not dying directly, didn't dare to show the slightest expression on their faces. Soon, the old doctor came out. Doctor, how is my granddaughter? Old Madame Luo asked with some urgency. Old Madam, don't worry. The third girl is fine. The injury on her head is not serious and there is no blood clot. The reason why she fainted was probably because she inhaled some smoke and was a little frightened. She will wake up soon. In fact, there was no red mark on Jingwan's head. Although he was old, he was a man after all. It was impossible for him to pull Jingwan's hair to see if it was a red mark. Amitabha. That's good, that's good. She finally breathed a sigh of relief. I will have to trouble the doctor to take a look at the master. Luo Peishan insisted that the doctor take a look at Jingwan first. He knew that he was fine, but if he didn't let the doctor take his pulse, everyone would be worried. Old Madam is too polite. This is my duty, the old doctor hurriedly said. After sending the doctor away, old Madame Luo went to the inner chamber to take a look at Jingwan. She ordered the maids to take care of her carefully and to send someone to inform her as soon as she woke up. She then looked at Nurse Gong, who had taken care of her ankle sprain. After a simple wash and change of clothes, Nurse Gong stood steadily and was still meticulous. She didn't see anything wrong with her. Old Madam heard from the young maid that her ankle was swollen like a steamed bun. For the past 2 years, Nurse Gong has done her best to take care of Wan. I have seen it all. This time, she has done a good job protecting the master. Old Madam, I don't deserve it. I can't escape the blame for Mrs. Condition. Old Madame Luo waved her hand. That was just an accident. There's no reason to blame you. I'm not that unreasonable. You should take care of yourself. Wan is used to you taking care of her. I don't feel at ease if someone else comes to take care of her. I will leave someone here to help you for the time being. When you recover, let her go back to my place. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.